if you're not doing it, it will be done to you. We looked around and we're like, it's McKinsey. They're talking about stuff we're doing and they're building an agent ecosystem. And who are they selling to? They're selling to the people above you. The notion of procurement as knowledge work is what is changing. And that's why when I wrote, I'm not encouraging my kids to go into this profession, and I wouldn't encourage them to go into supply chain or HR or most of finance at this point. It's true knowledge work. That is the work which is most at risk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, a practical guide where we focus on everything about procurement. Zach is here with me. Conrad is wandering somewhere in the world, but we're not missing him today because we have an exceptional guest with us, Jason Busch. Jason is an old colleague and a new friend, one of the most respectable name in procurement industry, a deep thinker, a provocative thinker with very many interesting ideas, an investor, a founder of Spend Matter, and just an amazing conversation partner. Jason and I had a couple of first interactions, and I said, you absolutely have to come to our podcast, Proc-N-Roll. So Jason, thank you for agreeing to be with us. We know you have your own podcast, and we're very grateful that you generously offered us to spend some time with us. So welcome. Thank you. And I'm going to start with reading the titles of the last 3 articles that you posted. The one article is named Legacy Procurement SaaS is Becoming a Rolex, but I Still Want One. The second is The War in Iran is an AI War. Your procurement and supply chain war should be as well. And the third, I love procurement, but I would tell my kids run away from it if they showed any interest. So obviously, you're piquing my interest. You know that I will read the articles that titled like that. And I'm sure that many of our readers will do too. So you have very unusual perspective on procurement, on data, and on various aspects of AI. Can you start with sharing how your procurement framework, thinking, outlook, mindset was shaped?
Sure. And it's great to be on the show. So first of all, thank you both for having me. And we'll miss Conrad. Maybe if I do not make too much of a fool of myself, I can join back with him in the future. But my background essentially started in consulting, and I randomly got into procurement. I was working for a firm in Boston in the 90s and started doing some research on dynamic price mechanisms for negotiations. I was interested in game theory. I'm horrible at math, but was philosophically interested in it. And that led me to a company in Pittsburgh called FreeMarkets. And I wrote an article in Information Week. I think it was everything blends together after 25 years. 99, I guess it was, or 98. And I met the founders after I wrote the article and decided to leave the safe industry of consulting and dive into strategic sourcing. And my frame of reference when I joined FreeMarkets, I was less interested in the stock options package or the salary. I was interested in the idea of spreading free markets, and not philosophically in terms of kind of the Chicago School of Economics, but the notion of building transparency in global markets, and that there was so much information asymmetry in negotiations and in buyer-supplier relationships. And so if you could break that down through something at that point as simple as an auction, even though it wasn't so simple. And I trace in my own podcast, the history of free markets with Sam Kinney from not a business perspective, but really from an economist perspective, if you're interested in the weeds as to how auctions got started and what they are and why they work and why they don't work. But my frame of reference around procurement really did come from that sourcing angle and the perspective that there was much work to do around breaking down barriers to information in making decisions. And not to say that every decision should be founded just on price. There's a tremendous number of externalities and a tremendous number of constraints we have in making decisions internally. And, that's up to each organization to factor them into account, which I tell people as an advisor, today, supplier diversity is not in vogue. But if you believe in that, if that should be a constraint, I don't, but you might believe in it, that becomes a constraint in your decision making, and you need to factor that in. Constraints come with a cost. And if you can quantify the cost as part of that decision, you can make an informed decision where everybody is contextually aware of what the cost of that trade-off was. So that is my frame of reference. And from that, I got pulled into everything else, e-procurement, contract management. At FreeMarkets, I kind of became the jack of all trades. I was working on mergers and acquisitions and product. So it really gave me an opportunity to learn about the space. But I still tell people, I find markets, bid-ask markets, and sourcing and that dirty word reverse auction to be my favorite areas of procurement still.
That's so old school though, Jason, isn't it? I mean, do you see many organizations doing auctions still today, or is it nostalgia, more of a nostalgia thing?
Well, I mean, there's absolutely elements of auctions, right? So if you're doing a combinatorial bid with Kilvar or trade extensions, which is part of Coupa now, or any type of optimization-based bid with multiple rounds, you're basically running an auction. You're just factoring in externalities and constraints and running scenarios. So an auction is philosophical as much as anything. But yes, I mean, even if you're not seeing a bid graph, let's say you're using an agentic layer or AI employees to run negotiations, in a multi-supplier situation, you're giving them market feedback and you're having them adjust their bid. I mean, that ultimately is still an auction. It may not be an auction again in that sense of Taurus or Procuri or FreeMarkets, to go legacy here for a minute, but it's still an auction.
No, absolutely. And just, I want to get your opinion on this because we've had this discussion before on the podcast. Agents negotiating with other agents, for you, is that something you see as a sure thing in the future? Or, do you see like the human being taken out of, for example, auctions, negotiations, bid price optimization, etc.? Are agents really going to run that whole space in the future in terms of providing that transparency and efficiency?
Well, I would say let's take a kind of a step back for a minute. I'm really dividing my work life into three areas right now. And I'm putting all the intellectual emphasis and focus on the first two. So one is data businesses. So data businesses in the age of AI, because proprietary data sets fuel AI-based decision-making. And I think there's a huge moat for data-based businesses. And it may not just be category or commodity price data. You may have global trade data. You may have risk data. You may have any kind of data. But as long as it's not been captured by a large language model yet, it's still proprietary. Eventually, quantum may encroach on that, but for now, we're still in good shape. The other piece is kind of that whole AI-based layer. And there's kind of three tiers of it, I would say. You have the Copilot tier. Copilots could be really valuable. I would never demean them. In one of the businesses I'm involved with, Metal Miner, we built a Copilot layer on top of our data for metal prices, critical minerals, rare earths, and forecasting for demand availability, where pricing is going, for disruption modeling. And you can model your spend in the context of the data. And it's hugely powerful. And it's actually not that hard to build if you have the data behind it. The next layer is agentic. So I think agentic is probably the most overused. A lot of people are talking about agentic extensions to source to pay or e-procurement and the like, or even intake and orchestration. But agentic is really a series of actions being taken on your behalf. It could be write an email for a supplier, send it out, and tell me the summary of what the supplier says. But it's a whole new layer extension on top of existing capabilities. The next layer beyond that is at my startup where I spend most of the rest of my time, Gain, in Tel Aviv. We are building AI employees for merchandising and retail and grocery and procurement. And I won't say they think and act like humans because they think differently. And I think in many levels, they'll be more effective in a very near term. And I say much more effective than humans because they can take into account huge amounts of information. They can leverage existing technology. They can code on the fly. I mean, it's hugely disruptive. And there's others here too, by the way. It's not just game, but there's so much going on there.
My team has met Ben and Natalie last week, which gains agents, and
AI employees.
They gains employees, and it's really impressive how instrumental they will be in helping procurement to achieve the targets faster, smarter, in a very compliant way.
Thank you. So we have this kind of AI-based layer, and again, it comes in multiple flavors. A lot of organizations are still focused on co-pilots on top of Microsoft, which is great. It's a great place to start. And there's a lot you could do in rolling your own. The other place I spend a little bit of time is what I call the legacy SaaS world. And when I make fun of it on LinkedIn, I'm doing it in the nicest possible way. But I think that SaaS has a shelf life, or a half-life, as I've called it. I wrote an essay on the half-life of SaaS. So if you think
you're comparing them to Rolex, there is no nicer way to do it other than Rolex.
I still don't have a Rolex, but I collect a lot of old SaaS, though I would like a Rolex. But as I look at the SaaS world, and I spend some time here on the investor side, mostly helping investors on underwriting investments. It's what I did when I was at Spend Matters for a long time. I like to think in half-lives, and different assets have different half-lives because of AI, and things which are easily fungible in private sector. Eloise Epstein was, I think, very prescient in describing contract management as dead. I think Eloise got that right really early, and everybody thought that Eloise was crazy at the time. But the notion of SharePoint and an agentic layer is kind of what's happened, and then interesting solutions on top of it. Yet, if you're in a deeply regulated industry in financial services or government, the half-life for a SaaS solution may be 10 years. It may be longer versus 3 years or 5 years. So I enjoy spending time there, trying to be as objective as possible, knowing what's happening around me in terms of what is the half-life of solutions. But I think the tech sector that I grew up in, and I grew up more in around tech than consulting ultimately, or being a practitioner. I've done sourcing, but I did it as a consultant when I was at FreeMarkets for part of the time. But this tech sector I grew up in, I feel like I feel like I'm going to put it in scary terms. I'm like the older parent or the grandparent, like watching my kids or grandkids get involved in drugs, and it's not going well. Like, this is not a period that's going to all end well for everyone. And so we need to figure out, what do we do with these tools? What do we do with the people using these tools? Ultimately having the mindset of, within the define of a corporate environment, how do we serve shareholders but preserve as many jobs as possible in terms of new roles?
I want to ask a little bit about that, Jason, because what you said resonates a lot. But we're going from this world of SaaS to then potentially, starting to roll out co-pilots like you described. Then we're moving on to agents, and I think people see agents as operating within predefined frameworks of how procurement works, for example, or finance or whatever. And then you also mentioned AI employees as well that you're working on. Okay. What's the difference? Maybe that's a good starting point between, say, an agent and an AI employee, right? And what's the impact of either? And is it either or? Do they complement each other? Is an AI employee a better version of an agent, for example? How do you see it?
So to pull out, the consulting rabbit out of a hat, let's think of, I'm thinking about this on the fly, but let's think about a matrix, kind of XY axis, which, defines kind of where you are. And again, I don't want to pass judgment here. It's just is what it is, right? So, one axis I think is autonomy, is the degree of autonomy. And, the other axis is probably it's breadth or creativity. Like, creativity to solve a problem? Can I build tools on the fly? Can I make a phone call and use voice? If I'm an AI employee, how much is at my disposal and how deep can I go? And it's different from autonomy. So, if you think about a co-pilot, it's really not autonomous. It's not overly creative or deep, but it's solving a human-based problem, right? So we're still making a human 3 to 5 times as productive if we get things right. But the more you move down the path to agentic, and the more you move down the path to a true AI employee, and by the way, I've had friends give me a lot of shit for using the phrase AI employee, that AI doesn't think, it doesn't reason. And they're partially right. There are reasoning models, and I know we're not going to get into the technical weeds today, but how they operate approximates an employee. And at the speed, the depth, the knowledge, all the information they can bring to bear, the context that you can bring to bear with an AI employee as well, domain specific, industry specific, company specific. Again, one of my learnings in rolling out an AI employee at a large retailer in Europe is the number of hard-coded rules we had to do to be in line with their corporate standards. It's like you're pitching autonomy and then you have to hard code stuff, but it makes sense, right? Like if there's regulatory constraints, if there's something in the corporate DNA. But then I would ask the procurement team, if you knew you had 100 hard-coded constraints, how many is a human following? Is a human following every constraint? Probably not. So I think as we go down the matrix and we go to the upper right of that quadrant, again, with one axis being autonomy and the other being probably a hybrid of breadth and creativity, AI employees, I think, have the potential to do a much better job than humans in terms of following corporate policy, not just executing on beliefs. And that gets into a broader question. I was thinking about this on a run this morning before we hopped on today, maybe a subject of an essay. I need a good analogy for it, though. That if we take what we're doing today from an AI perspective in most organizations, it's very much serving the need of existing humans, right? But what if we turn that upside down and we begin to model the outcomes entirely? So what outcomes is procurement? What is procurement tasked with, at the highest possible level in a management meeting or board meeting? And then rather than routing it around the human constraints of how, we have a bandwidth, what if we come up with alternative ways of solving for it? And it's kind of how development's being done today as well, which has just changed so dramatically that, we are, imagine prompt engineering procurement. I'm going to prompt engineer my goals, and then it just happens. And it's not vibe coding. It's better than vibe coding. And I think we're closer to this than most people think. And I know companies are monoliths and, you get your adherence to SAP or Coupa or Ariba or Zip or whatever. But if we blow up that construct and we think about prompt engineering the goals, it changes everything.
So, and this is where I feel a little bit like, I don't know, schizophrenic or bipolar, because every time I talk to you or I talk to Zach and I better understand how technology is evolving, how it will be enabling us in the future. And it feels to me that, okay, well, it's very readily available. Let's just start playing with that. But then I hit the reality. I go to the field, I go to see my prospects, I go see clients, and they're nowhere near even intellectual comprehension of how they will integrate it in their environment. Everyone is very smart. Everyone is very educated. People understand it exists. The thinking that we had 2 years ago, maybe it will pass. That thinking is gone. So that's already progress. Enterprises realize it's not going to pass. But in the conversations in a very many companies, when I ask who owns AI strategy, they're like, CPO? No, CFO. No, it must be the head of strategy. No,
or a CISO.
The head of transformation. CISO, CTO, CIO. And So how do you think enterprises will bridge it, or what guidance would you give to procurement professional or any other professionals that would listen to podcast, like how to start embracing it, like what enterprises can start doing to, because yes, first step is done. They mentally know it exists and it will be part of their DNA. So how to start really accepting it?
I think that's the $1 million question. And what I would say is, if you're not doing it, it will be done to you. I was at a conference, not in the procurement industry, but a domain specific conference in retail and grocery for Gain a few months ago. And, we're trying to figure out who's our competition in retail and grocery. And I ran competitive intelligence for FreeMarkets 25, 27 years ago. So I kind of laugh at competition, right? I think a lot of competition is good competition. It creates a market. You could be friends with your competitors. But we looked around and we're like, it's McKinsey. Like, they're talking about stuff we're doing and they're building an agent ecosystem. I know Accenture is doing the same thing. So, and who are they selling to? They're selling to the people above you. So my point is, if you're not doing something, it will be done to you. And this gets into KPMG as well, Zachary, and then the future of how you structure your practice. And you're probably doing similar things also. I shouldn't leave KPMG out of that equation. I don't know what I don't know. So, I tell people, start building things on your own, within the confines of what you can do. Maybe you don't have a Python environment that's authorized, but you can start building things quickly yourself to get familiar, with how do you build a lightweight, Copilot based application, even on top of Excel. I've had friends who have, built 80% of classic spend analysis solutions using large language models to do cleansing, classification, and enrichment in a matter of months. And the cost to serve is 5% of what a legacy spend analysis solution is. You could build that internally. I'm not saying to go do it, but, start building things, experimenting. I would literally treat every SaaS investment right now as, sunk cost around what you need to keep the status quo going. But I would spend equal time trying to destroy that status quo. And I know that's easier said than done. One thing I'm seeing is a lot of these bigger initiatives are coming from above procurement. So they're coming from the head of digital. They're coming from head of strategy. They're coming from CEO, usually not the CFO. And IT is actually taking a backseat in lots of cases and is a roadblock in a positive way. Like, I think the role of a CISO is absolutely critical. If you get a 100-page questionnaire for your agentic solution, that's probably a good idea. Like, there's tremendous cyber risk with this stuff for sure.
Would you agree that in the absence of vacuum, CPOs should step forward and suggest that they own AI strategy? Because AI is not just a technology. It's a lot about process. It's a lot about flow.
I would try and, honestly, I'm not sure if a lot of CPOs are ready for it. And what I would say is, if you're ready to make that leap and you really want to future-proof your career, try and set up a digital twin of your organization, which is truly a digital twin. So you have your existing org, and then how can you set something up which can work alongside it and begin to take over things, possibly without the other side even knowing it, pilot it, work on it, because at one point you're going to flip that switch, and some humans will make it over, but some won't. So that concept of an actual physical digital twin, I think is the best way to do it. There are some CPOs I know, and I won't call them out, but some I know who will absolutely make it. They're super creative. They view labor as the biggest constraint, and not that humans are bad, but humans go home. They take breaks. The average IQ is 100. We're gonna pass that very quickly in terms of decision making with AI, and it will always be on. And it's There was a chart I should have pulled. I should have pulled it up here, but it was a chart in 2015 that somebody sketched. Essentially around chimpanzees to Einstein and kind of where AI was, and we're at that phase where everybody will have the capability of an Einstein at their fingertips really, really soon. And again, it may not appreciate all human reasoning and empathy and other things, but the notion of procurement as knowledge work is what is changing. And that's why when I wrote, I'm not encouraging my kids to go into this profession, and I wouldn't encourage them to go into supply chain or HR or most of finance at this point, unless it were the salesy part of finance and banking. Sales will not go away. But is that even the most cultured, curated, credentialed knowledge work? And certainly I would put sourcing and procurement, in that category. And, we can look at how much people make in the profession and how it's changed over the years. And we're finally respected. And we see that in salaries. It's true knowledge work. That is the work which is most at risk.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jason. And this is so great to me because I felt alone in trying to also help any other organizations and explain to them that procurement, in my head, procurement is going to become a computer. I think this is why Natasha sometimes gives me some flack, because it's a bit of a provocative thing to also consider. But I think you're saying something similar, right? So procurement will just be something that's run as part of a suite of applications that runs your entire back office, right? Who knows? And that's not managed by a procurement person, but it could be managed by people who actually understand the models and the reasoning and bias, and who actually manage the AI layer across multiple operations. But a key question for me, Jason, it tags on to what Natasha was talking about: make versus buy. Like a lot of people now are holding back, making investments. They're trying to understand and learn and get to a place where they feel ready, right? But the technology is moving so fast. And you've painted a picture for us of it's very hard to see the future. It's a very fuzzy picture in the future. And I think and also you gave us an example of, you said, if you were a CPO today, create a digital twin, start building things and see how it takes over, like your organization, your current operating model, etc. But how do you do that? Like, are people going to make and everyone's going to build these things themselves? Are they going to wait for some big, new agentic platform to come and you just buy that in? And your point well made around it might not be done by CPOs, but it might be done to CPOs by other people in the business as well. So just your thoughts around how you actually navigate this for real.
I think it's so organizational dependent. Part of the problem of being a CPO is, your average tenure is 3 to 5 years, right? And you're going to move around. And what type of organization are you coming into? I know some people who, are done with the Fortune 500 and all they do is private equity right now, in terms of going in, because it's so numbers driven. And you can move a lot faster if you have a goal around numbers. And you can optimize for specific numbers versus something more nebulous. And don't get me started on private equity. There's problems with private equity as well. Because you're so optimizing for numbers, you may be ignoring other numbers. But, that's neither here nor there. But I would say certain industries will move faster. Fast moving goods, lower margins, they will be more inclined to take risks, I think, at the corporate level. I think private equity backed manufacturers and roll-ups will likely, take risks too, because the gains are so much greater. But the cost to do things and build things is not like an Ariba rollout. I mean, you can get started so much faster now. And I don't want to demean Ariba, but we all know that, something that costs $1 million a year, back in the day, you were paying $3 to $6 million to get it working over the course of 18 or 24 months. It's the opposite here. You can start getting value fairly quickly, whether it's homegrown, and or you're pursuing, kind of an agentic or AI employee first solution as well. But I would encourage piloting. I would encourage failing fast. I would encourage, if I were a CPO, and I would encourage everybody on my team to go build an app. Like, I would just say, do it. And it can be for you. It doesn't have to be for everybody. Go think about how you automated things with Excel macros in the past. Go, what thing do you hate to do? Like, do you hate telling suppliers bad news? Most procurement people like telling suppliers bad news because we're, Machiavellian. But whatever you don't like to do, find a way to automate it yourself. I have not coded since high school. And, I got in trouble with a company I'm involved with recently for I didn't close out a loop in Google. And essentially I ran a process that cost us an extra $50 in compute time. And I'm automating things I don't like to do. And that was a simple calendar sync across calendar environments. So people could see my schedule.
Absolutely. I've been through this journey, Jason, of building applications and what I've learned is that absolutely the learning curve is crazy easy now to try to start to learn. And you get into the point where you're looking at latency and you're looking at how many tokens use, how much things cost. So is everyone's head going towards that space? Is everyone going to become sort of a code manager, and they'll be thinking of applications in that way? What I'm hearing you say or suggest is that, I think the make rather than the buy is probably the way most organizations are going to roll this out.
I think individuals, yes. I think as you move up the organization, you're going to see decisions made to build parallel AI workforces. And you'll see them compete against internal teams. And then we'll see, and again, I'm future casting here, maybe in the next 24 months, but I think we'll see a parallel universe of humans becoming more productive and digital environments to do the same work being built and decided on high. My experience on the vendor side right now is that the people who traditionally would have bought a SaaS tool might not be the ones buying AI employees. They're often more senior and they're often more willing to experiment and see, do these things actually work and how capable are they? The same token, I think we'll see parallel initiatives from the bottoms up, and sometimes they'll beat, the more senior initiatives.
So, Jason, we pride ourselves that Proc-N-Roll is a practical guide to procurement. So, how would you recommend for someone who listens? Okay, I want to start. I'm brave enough. I'm smart enough. I'll figure it out. I will not allow this new notion to intimidate me. I'll be able to build my agent. Where do people start? Can you give practical steps like start here, learn this, read this, do this?
Yeah, first of all, I think you need to escalate internally and see what you have available to you in the company. You probably have Microsoft available to you to build a Copilot, which is using OpenAI. Great place to start. I use all the models myself. I use all the paid models. I know companies using open source models too, but I have through my organizations access to the best versions, of Claude, of OpenAI, and Gemini, and they're all good for different things.
All good for different things. I was going to say you don't need the best.
And I use Grok for research too. I use Super Grok for research. Grok is insane on the research side. So it's interesting if you look at some of the controversies going on right now with the Department of War and the Pentagon and Grok. Sorry, of Claude, yeah, but also too, behind the scenes, so why aren't they using Grok? Why is OpenAI in there? Grok is the most powerful research tool out there. I think it tends to make slightly more mistakes right now, and I think there was some concern over that. But so I use everything, and so first you need to see what is available to you, and again, if you can dream it, you can build it. And some people, especially on the development side, prefer Claude right now. In terms of coding, I think that makes total sense versus even dedicated AI-based coding tools. We see Claude budgets expanding inside lots of vendors right now because of that. But even if you just have Copilot on top of OpenAI, it's a great place to start. So find out what you have available. What are your problem sets? Is it a monthly report you have to do? Is it supplier communications? Is it some kind of audit you have to do? Is it a category strategy? Whatever it is, what don't you like to do or what takes a lot of your time? Find a way to automate it. At the same token, find the data you need to do it. You may not have access to all the data you need out there. There's tons of data providers. Historically in procurement, we thought of, supply risk providers, diversity providers, but there's many other types of providers as well. If you're in the food space, for example, you may care about, weather and agricultural reports, not just commodity prices, because you want to do your own forecasts. So you need data to fuel the AI. And in many cases, the data is still proprietary. So you need to think about that strategy too, and licensing and the like, and then go and do it. At the same time, the same token, look to compete third-party solutions which have been built. If something is out there, like there's some tremendous progress being made right now in the contract space. There's some nice agentic plug-in tools for sourcing, which stop short of the stuff we're building again on the AI employee side. Figure out what is out there. And if you don't know where to start, sure, you can ask My Old Company, Spend Matters, or Gartner, or anyone. You can also ask ChatGPT.
So let's elevate the conversation to the next level and broader utilization of AI. I know you connecting AI to the war in Iran. I know you connecting AI to parenting. And I'll finish this conversation today asking you, you're not recommending your kids to go to procurement and supply chain, but I'll ask you later, where do you recommend them to go? But for now, can you share your perspective about this broader, more holistic, more not necessarily philosophical, but greater impactful way of utilizing AI, not just in business?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing you have to realize is that we build our identities, probably the three of us and people like us, on being knowledge workers. I started out as a blogger or writer alongside learning procurement, and my identity is wrapped up in this. Should it be? I actually, use every model to help me with writing and brainstorming now. I have it edit my final work. My identity is no longer wrapped up in being clever or having a lot of knowledge. My identity is wrapped up in being able to use these tools effectively and extend my, zone 2 run from 5 miles to 8 miles because I have more time during the day. So we have to think about what we value and who we are. Yes, I still get satisfaction out of writing a good essay. I still, put down a page usually before I even socialize it with a large language model to give me ideas or beat up on the idea. But the notion of sitting down to write, a monolith is going away, whether that's a category strategy or whether that is a report on technology or just commentary on it. I think with that frame, as whether we think of ourselves as leaders, as parents, as investors, if we agree, and we can disagree, I think disagreement's really important. I think the last mile of humanity inside companies is critical thinking. And that's a whole other path. We've in the past decade damaged the ability of many to think critically, though I think we can get that back. But the ability to argue multiple sides of the same argument or find an orthogonal side to that argument becomes important. But that alone also doesn't define us going forward. So, where does that leave us with jobs and everything else? I think there's going to be a period of real disruption to the economy, positively, negatively. It will be by country. Countries that have built their entire GDP on knowledge work or GDP growth on knowledge work, like India, I think will need to really think hard about redefining themselves. Because again, even the best knowledge workers are changing. So, where does that leave us as parents? The last thing I would do to encourage a child, or whether I was teaching a class on careers right now, would be to go into traditional knowledge work unless you were massively passionate about it. Like, let's say you want to be a lawyer and you want to be a public defender. If you're truly passionate about it and you're comfortable using AI to manage a huge caseload, go do it. or if you're the most salesy person in the world and you want to go into investment banking or go run enterprise sales for a company and you enjoy that, go do it. But short of that, think about for the next 10, 20 years until we truly have robotics everywhere, think about working with your hands. Think about developing esoteric skill sets. I kind of laugh. I wanted to remind myself of an old hobby a while ago. And I used to be an antiquarian bookbinder. I would restore old books. And this is actually a 16th century book by the Aldine Press. And I bought this when I was in grad school and restored it and rebacked it. I have a skill that, maybe a few thousand Americans have restoring books. It's rusty, but maybe I'll go back to that, in the future. More practical skill, the data center build out, we're short hundreds of thousands of electricians in this country. I have a friend where I live part-time in Indiana, who is an electrician, and he is inundated. He has his union job and then he has his moonlighting job, and it's well into the six figures, let's put it that way. And I think he's 27. He dropped out of Purdue engineering to go do that when he was 20. So
it's amazing that it came to electricians again, because before Anthony joined Proc-N-Roll as a producer, our previous producer actually left because he became a certified electrician. And it's amazing that it keeps coming back to electricians.
It does, but I want to challenge it a little bit, Jason, because
okay.
I love this notion of, the world's more productive. Everyone's got free time, universal basic income. I really wish that's a future that we can go to. I have an extra hour to do my workout every day. It'd be brilliant. On the other hand, humans are really good at filling all that time with more like work-related tasks. And if we take the example of building out agents and building out AI and building AI employees and building new companies and new businesses, is that also a path where, you can still do a level of knowledge work, but the knowledge work itself is about telling the AI or the agents or, what to do, and just do that full time, for example. Just case in point on this, robotics and that whole layer with, NVIDIA releasing their platform so you can train robots and, world models, and that in and of itself is like a huge thing, right? It's going to be around for quite a while. So
maybe we should stop for a second and define the world model concept for the audience. Do you want to take a stab at it? I'm happy to chime in.
You do a better job than me. I got to be honest.
I just started learning about them. So this is the notion that large language models and small language models, are trained on data, but they're trained on data that can be read or processed. Numbers and words, basically. Reddit chat rooms, but the concept of a world model is training it on real world and world data. So, video. This is why a lot of people think that Elon's strategy of SpaceX and Tesla and Grok coming together are an XAI, I think it's called, are going to be the world killer because it's world models. It's trained on real world data. So, the notion of being out there and actually learning experientially as a human learns versus as a system learns. So I think that if you don't understand world models, just go look them up. It's really fascinating. But yeah, absolutely. If you're entrepreneurial, whether that is out of creativity or that is out of wanting to build something new or just make money, there will be, people talk about abundance in this world if we get through the transition, but I think we'll see throughput of businesses in many, many new ways. We'll see things get built faster. We will see things fail faster. We'll, be able to come up with ideas and test them and refine. It's like A/B testing, cubed.
Yeah, and that's really where my head's at, Jason. I'm trying to think about what opportunities are going to come about as a result of all this change, and how it would work with the universal basic income. We can go down that conversation a bit more and think, well, how much is a good income, right? And how does it veer towards everyone gets the same car, everyone gets the same house, I'll
talk about it abstractly. I mean, I'll try and be more concrete as an example. So, I have aging parents still alive, fortunately. So does my wife. And, my wife's parents invested in home care insurance, 25 years ago. And even though they try and claw back some of it every year, it ended up being a good investment for home care, because home care is really expensive. Nursing care, assisted living. I mean, these things are, assisted living facility could be $7 or $10 a month at the entry level. Yeah, really expensive, right? But imagine if we have, robots doing much of that work, robots building the facilities. All of a sudden, you take down the cost to serve tremendously. I'm still a free market person at heart. I think capitalism is a source largely of good. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's better than the alternatives. But I think we need to think about all of this going forward. And, we can look at it as exciting and increasing the quality of life, but also, what do humans do? I mean, one thing I find interesting being, somebody who's kind of taken a religious journey over the years from atheism to agnosticism to being a bit more religious from there, is models find themselves fascinated with religions. Like, you can have a conversation with Claude about Judaism or Islam, Christianity. It's fascinating. Like, it's really, really interesting. And, maybe we find new meaning in different things.
But I think how to keep people busy, it's a very, very important question, because we know that for many of us, our job is one of the, if not the main purpose, but one of the critical purpose, and that, as you mentioned, something that contributes to our identity. People have to do something, and otherwise they get in trouble or they cause troubles. They actually put their creativity into creating troubles. And we're not teaching kids in schools to spend more time contemplating, philosophizing, or writing, or meditating. So we are not really truly human beings. We are human doings. So I think that this shift needs to start happening now. So 10 years from now, we're not going to have a generation of very frustrated and angry youth that just has absolutely no practical application to their vibrant energy and power that 20-year-olds have.
I'll chime in there for a second. So I'm not affiliated with it, but my wife is threatening to quit her business and her job to go work with or develop an offshoot of a group called Johnson O'Connor. It's a nonprofit, and they do career testing. We've had all of our kids do it. I've had a partner at a consulting firm who did it. And they map your aptitude and demonstrated skills to your interests. And then you can see what jobs are out there based on both theoretically what you would be good at and what you're interested in and what that overlap
natural
is.
aptitude, Jason? Like what you're naturally
Yes,
good at? Or
exactly.
Yeah.
So think about it as physical tests and IQ tests, right? So literally grip strength is one of the things. So I like to tell the story. My middle son, who wants to be a pilot in the military, he is very argumentative and very clever. He would have been a good lawyer if lawyers still had a future. But we had him tested a few years ago, and it said lawyer, and then it also said pilot or ship captain. And he got really exciting. And like when you unplugged it, it was because his grip strength was so strong, and he loved working with his hands. So we never would have known that. So we actually tracked him early on for that. And we said, hey, you should apply to the Merchant Marine Academy. You should apply, to ROTC. You should apply to these different things to develop a practical skills which will involve your hands. And we never would have known that. So I think this notion of career testing becomes really important for us. We may find ourselves, the three of us, taking career tests to figure out what to do. But, certainly for our children and our grandchildren too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you think that schools need to teach more English, more writing, more conceptualizing, more critical thinking, logical reasoning. Is that of value?
Do we need schools with AI? Is the other question.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe the first question: do we need schools?
There's a lot of good debates around this, like Alpha Academy. If you haven't checked it out, it's 2 hours of learning a day with an AI tutor and a human tutor working with you on the AI, and then you do other things. You can do sports, you can build businesses, and the data suggests 2 hours of dedicated learning with a human coach behind it pushes kids far ahead of any classroom environment. So, and Alpha is hoping to get this onto a physical laptop or iPad soon versus the high cost to serve, right now, having to consume tokens essentially as part of it. And they'll get there quickly. So I think the classroom, and I've had this debate with the principal at my kid's school in terms of, and it wasn't like the woke debate, it was the opposite of that. It was, even though we disagree politically, the comment is AI. So what are you doing about AI? And obviously then as a parent volunteer, it's like, well, how can you help us? Like what's going on? And I think critical thinking is absolutely, a great classroom skill for sure. But I think we will still want to have the basics, even going through, calculus, AB and BC, going through physics, going through, world history and US history, or Russian history, whatever you want. But we can learn, because of AI, we can teach to the weakest link that much faster. Like, it turns out one of the impediments to high SAT and ACT scores for math is your weakest link. You may have had advanced math, but something you didn't learn, and I'm just quoting the Alpha playbook here, something you didn't learn in 8th grade could be holding you back from adding 50 points to your SAT score. And you got to figure out what that is. Your teacher is not going to figure that out, but AI will figure it out, and then it will drill you to get it right. So, I'm an accidental business person. I always thought I would be a high school history teacher or college professor in history. And so much of this stuff I think is still relevant, but I think we can learn the basics in greatly compressed time and then use classroom time for other things, for sure.
Jason, my last question from me, and then maybe Natasha, I'll give you last final word as well. Just, the future in the next 10, 20 years for you, and I know it's very hard to see. Overall, with everything that's happening with AI, everything, positive, outcome for humanity, negative, or it depends?
I think this will be, I think we will see era of disruption and violence that, follows world history and other periods of disruption. We're going through a war right now in the Middle East, whether you agree with it or not. I happen to think it's absolutely essential and will create stability in the long run. But I think we will have more wars and disruptions because of it. We will have social unrest and disruption. But long term, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think this changes everything. But I think it will be by country. I think countries of energy abundance like the US, I think the data center race are key, for example, against China. That's a whole other topic. But I think the pain will be unequally distributed among countries. And it's not fair, but life isn't fair.
I think even a realistic answer there. So yeah, this is much appreciated. Natasha, do you have any final questions?
First of all, I know your family is closely connected to the war that is happening right now. And first of all, we hope your son is safe and the rest of your family. And maybe the last question is, will AI impact how the world is run? In other words, will democracy win? Will totalitarianism win? Will we manage to see things closer eye to eye, or will disparity of perspectives will increase? Will we get closer or will we get further away from each other?
I think that is the argument, that if you believe that, we're in a race right now between the West, whatever that means, and China, why the AI race is so important, and why, people like me a few years ago, stood up and took positions around critical thinking and education. And at the time around woke AI, that, AI, if you asked it, tell me a Jewish joke, it would tell you a Jewish joke. If you said, tell me a black joke, it wouldn't do it. And it still won't in many cases. That's a problem, right? That's a real problem. We shouldn't necessarily have guardrails which treat people differently in AI. But if you're China and you say, tell me a Uyghur joke, I'm sure it would do it. Tell me about Tiananmen Square, it's not going to give you an answer. So I think we are in a race between historically Western values in AI and values which are based on central planning. And I hope the future embraces a plurality of views, and that we don't have one model. We have many models out there, and we're using a combination of them. But I think, we are in an existential race with China right now. And I think it should be a bipartisan issue, right? A post-partisan issue in America to figure that out.
Fascinating.
Jason, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. We went from, starting procurement all the way to what's the future of the world. I really appreciate it. It's full of practical advice. And my two takeaways from this, I think, Jason, two sayings that you usually get only one, but if you can dream it, you can build it. Last mile of humanity inside companies is critical thinking. And I'm sure there's a few more that's peppered in here that we'll pull out as well. Thank you so much for your time, Jason. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
It's been amazing. Thank you very much, Jason.